Hey, hey. All right. Go loud with it. So we just waiting for Lorenzo to jump on. We gonna get started. Thanks everybody for jumping on with us.
You know how to add someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm gonna text him.
Okay, we got him.
What's
Lorenzo,
going on? What's going on?
how you doing, brother?
Uh, busy day, busy day. Actually getting ready to head downtown. Um,
Yeah.
to yeah, to try to just play a support role because we do have a lot of youth that are participating in the protests. I was down there last night. Uh, I don't even know what time I left, but
Mm-hmm.
just want to definitely make sure that there's folks there that know that there are people from this city that care and want to make sure that everyone gets home safe. So we made sure that at the very least we provided people with water. Um, there were people going around passing out masks. There was a group of folks who were managing, I guess, the snack station, but they had to leave. So we like, look, just hand it to us. We got it. Make sure everybody got their apples and their bananas, and even had to jump in to washing a few people's eyes out. Because you have a lot of people who are protesting for the very first time, and they definitely want to be part of this moment in our history to finally do something, whatever that may be. But we know we have to do something different than what the status quo has been showing us for all these years, especially with the type of leadership that's been in place that continues to push policies that create these. Let me make sure I mute all this. All these policies that look,
No,
phone don't stop until like early morning. It just don't stop.
I
But
know.
we just want to make sure that we're pushing policies that actually benefit the lives of Black and brown people of this city and not destroying more lives. There's always this false narrative about safety and how we need to overinvest in policing. You have one side saying that, oh, it's not enough police on our corners. You have another side saying that actually is too much. I'm getting stopped just leaving my house and I'm being asked where the guns at, but I'm a teacher, I work in this city. I teach your babies, but they're asking me where the guns at, so that type of experience that plays out over and over with DC police, it's easy for us to focus on what's happening in so many other cities, but we know it's the same tale here in Washington, DC, where people who are traumatized in the name of safety, making people feel safe. So it's our collective struggle to try to unite as proud people who not going to back down. As you can see, I know there are some folks who are serious about their respectability politics who could not handle people defending themselves by throwing punches at the cops. Ain't nobody trying to tell people to be violent, but ain't nobody trying to stand there and just allow anyone to treat you any kind of way that they feel, especially when we're deep in this pandemic. People were already stressed, just heighten it even more. People were already struggling, just heighten it even more. You think the last thing I want to deal with the cop is coming in my face telling me I need to move when they ignored the group of white folks at the tennis court, which is what one of the people said in one of those videos? That's a traumatizing experience that repeats itself over and over. But I'm committed. I ain't mean to be just rambling,
Look,
but you know,
look,
it's
look.
a lot, man. It's a lot, and you know, I'm hyped. I'm hyped up. I'm angry. It's change for our city for Ward 7. You know, that's why we build this coalition across the city to try to make sure that we're committed to fighting for deeply affordable housing for our people, you know, and make sure that it's in all parts of the city instead of what we have today where, you know, Wards 2 and Ward 3 are not carrying their fair share of building out more affordable housing units. You know, we have to make sure that we're building out a network of affordable grocery stores, community owned grocery stores, so that we can build equity in it, create our own dedicated pipeline of jobs for people in our community. You know, make sure that we have ownership of a resource that we're always going to need. We're always going to need food access. Why
Yeah.
do we have to play this game every year and every decade with every new developer that wants to tell us that we're not eligible to get access to a good grocery store because we don't make enough income? Even though there have been so many legacy businesses that we have sustained over the years with our incomes. We have the disposable income to sustain the store. We just need leadership that's going to believe in us, you
Hmm.
know. And of course, the big issue on everybody's minds in Ward 7 is public safety. You know, as you know, I'm very big on
Yeah.
us reimagining what safety is. And safety for a lot of people isn't more police. Safety is, okay, maybe this person wouldn't have to make the decision they have to make out of survival if they had access to housing, if they
Yeah.
weren't living on the streets, you know, if they weren't, you know, trying to figure out how I'm gonna feed myself, how I'm gonna feed my children, you know, if they weren't living in a society that has oppressed us for so long, generation after generation after generation. We only been technically free, technically, or whatever, however they want to frame it, for the last 60 years. So it's sort of like we've only been able to spread our wings as much as we could, you know, in recent years. So there's going to be a lot of generational pain that's not going to be solved overnight,
Yeah.
but we're not going to solve it by constantly pointing the fingers at each other and blaming ourselves for the problems we live in. We didn't make the choice to be redlined. We didn't make the choice to live in housing with lead. You know, we did what we could in the time being to survive with what's available to us
Right.
compared to how we've been treated for so long. And all of these things are compounded. It repeats itself. You know, they may seem little when people say these things like housing with lead, but they don't understand the legacy of that, how they affect your brain, how people who are babies growing up in that housing, what they happens to them when they become adult and the choices they make. You know, it isn't because they wanted to be violent. It's because we intentionally made it so. We didn't do our part. And
Hmm.
we have to be committed to, you know, change the politics in this city because I'm tired. And I know you tired of this. And it's just too much fake and phony stuff, too many
Hmm.
puppets, you
Yeah.
know. You know, we
I,
did a motorcade,
you,
did
you,
a
you
motorcade in Ward
said it.
7. It's
Look,
just,
I already
I
know
couldn't
you
help myself.
committed. I already know you committed, and that's why we really wanted to do this, and we really wanted to take this process, and we really wanted to introduce our folks to you in a way and make sure people hear who I don't gotta. You know what? Let me say you something. This is the only shirt that I got.
The classic.
Look, this is the only shirt that I got, right?
Yes,
And there's a reason
the
why this is the only
original.
shirt I got. Huh?
Right.
It's a
That's the
reason why this
original.
shirt the only shirt I got because you was on the ground with us, right?
Right. Right.
So when you talk
Right.
about these young people and you talk about this, we ain't just meeting each other when it's time for you to run for office, right?
Right.
So it's
Right.
important for us to kind of, you know, and that's why we
Right.
commend you, right? And I really want to say that, and you know, because I say, man, it's out. We need leaders stepping up, right?
Yeah.
People that's not bought in our city, and you doing something really big, and you inspiring people native to this land because they're not speaking up enough, right?
Right.
And and when they are
And I
speaking
get
up,
it.
and
And I
when
get it. You know, folks are tired. They're tired of hearing the same things. You
Mhm.
know, they're tired of repeating themselves over and over to different people who claim that they're going to come around and say, I'm the change we need, instead of just reminding folks that they are the change. You know, the change
yeah,
begins with us. You know,
yeah,
we just have to find our inner power to rise up and
mhm,
reclaim this city. You know,
yeah,
I tell people all the time, we built this city.
mhm,
So we deserve our return on that investment.
mhm,
So the way we get that return on investment is not to continue to play this game where, we have a city that's putting profit over people, paying out all these developers and contractors. But when it comes to communities needing something or wanting something, we got to fight and argue and beg, and we still don't get it. We have
Yeah.
servers, bartenders, and, waitresses who live east of the river but work in all these swanky restaurants downtown, but they can't get a higher tip minimum wage. That's the problem. We still have people who can't, afford to live in the housing that's available, and we have reauthorization of the rent control law. So we know that this is our moment to expand that rent control law, strengthen and put more teeth in it so we can, protect more buildings and, make sure that we do something about these voluntary predatory agreements that people get forced into down at landlord-tenant court. These things we have to change. It's a long list, but we have to do the work so that we are protecting more people and making sure more people have access to housing in this city.
And could you, because what makes your campaign different? You participate. Can you tell people more about the Fair Elections program? Because that's another thing that your campaign stands out, right? And it's important that people understand what has changed and why people like you even have, because they might not have heard about you had not this program existed. So
right, and I know that there's a lot of people who haven't heard my name or heard about what we've done. And I recognize that as working people, we're focused on making sure we put food on our tables and clothes on our backs. So, it's not easy for us to be so in tune about every community meeting or ANC meeting or whatnot, because we're trying to live our lives. But with the Fair Elections program, at the very least, I can tell folks I'm not bought and paid for by no developer, no private interest in this city whatsoever. All the financing I get is from you, the taxpayer. I raise up to $50 per person, and the city matches it 5 times. So that makes sure that DC residents have a deep investment in what's happening in the city. So I'm proud to be in that program. I'm proud to say that I'm not for sale. It's evident in my work. Other people in this race can't say that. They can't say they're not for sale. There's folks who can't say that. That they're not a puppet for Mario Bowser, even though we see it all in their donations, all in their resume, but I know that we have to be committed to ensure that we have independent leadership in Ward 7 that's willing to challenge the status quo and fight for every single dollar that's due to us on this side of town, including funding our schools. Yeah, our schools is another thing. Independent,
independent.
Yeah, I'm a Democrat, but I'm not no puppet.
And that's what people got to focus on, independence, because a lot, and you got to check those endorsements. Somebody asked me, one of our fathers asked me, who is he endorsed by? Who is it? We want to know who they endorsed by. And please go ahead, show them, because the community.
Absolutely. And let me say this, because I heard another one of my opponents say this down at a polling place. Saying that, when people get endorsements, they owe them something, even though these was the same endorsements that he was trying to get. But I told folks, I don't owe anybody anything. Most of my endorsements come from unions. I was in a union. I was in AFG Local 1000 at Department of Employment Services when I was working in the unemployment unit. So I understand what it is when you got to fight for every single piece of dollar and make sure that whatever the collective bargaining agreement is on the table is actually going to bring the benefits that you deserve for getting up every day to serve the people of this city. So I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Washington Teachers Union, because teachers have been on the front lines fighting every day to ensure that we have an equitable budget for schools. Has been called by the mayor and the chancellor about how Ward 7 and 8 schools are not getting fair funding. They're the ones that's been on the front line saying that, in order for me to do my job better, I need these kids to get the resources they need. Because a lot of our kids can't read and write. We have a lot of kids who come from homes that need more resources, more support. You get my kids that I teach the resources they need, I can do my job a lot better. They're not fake with what they're fighting for. They're making it clear. These are the resources that our children need so that we can all have a better educational experience. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the people that drive our trains, that ride our buses, ATU Local 689. They represent the Metro workers, and they've been clear. And anybody that know me from my early days in Southeast, one of the first protests I did was against cuts against buses. the W6 and the WV, and they wanted to cut it, trying to say that, oh, it wasn't safe because kids were throwing bricks and rocks at them. I had to challenge the power to be to say we have to think beyond the we have to think beyond what our kids are doing today and get to the solutions to ensure that we get more access to transportation on outside of town. That means that we can't cut buses, that knowing that our seniors still need access to a grocery store across town because they don't have one in their neighborhood. We can't cut buses when we know that we have so many families who are disabled, who still need access. So we have to do our part to push back against these false narratives and challenge people to look at the solutions. You want kids to stop throwing rocks and stuff at the buses? Let's look at the fact that they don't really have no playgrounds in their neighborhood. They don't really have the after-school programs that they claim should be available. They can't get access to them. They don't live in a community that believes in making sure that we're building for us instead of building for profit. So, these are the things that we have to address collectively in this city before we go trying to cut vital resources like buses. And I earned the endorsement, of course, of the nonprofit Professional Employees Union, and I believe they represent DC Jobs for Justice and some other groups. So they definitely wanted to jump out there and make it clear that, this is the guy that understands the nonprofit industrial complex, and at the same time understand that we have to use a racial justice lens anytime that we're trying to address problems in Black and brown communities. It can't just be, folks who come from the sky with money from big corporations and their nonprofits trying to say what's good for us. We need. I'm sorry, y'all ain't supposed to see me. Don't see me. But their endorsement as well. We earned the endorsement of the Metropolitan Washington Council, AFL-CIO, basically the DC Labor Council. And they, were very direct and upfront by saying that they're not afraid to support challengers. A lot of our unions are very pissed off with the city. Just the other day, we earned the endorsement of our firefighters. IAFF Local 36, and that was a very, intense questioning process, and I have family members who serve as firefighters, who serve as EMT, so it was personal for me. I'm like, these are my relatives, people I went to high school with, Becoming a firefighter has always been definitely a career option for many people who live in the city, want to get better wages and, still want to serve their city in a capacity where they feel they're respected for the work they do. So I was proud to get their endorsement as well. Of course, many folks know Black Lives Matter DC. They hold me down from the beginning because they know, we got to challenge this structure instead of playing this game. Put single cops in back rooms. We really have to put in some accountability measures. And there's a long list of things we can do to make sure that we have some form of accountable policing in the city, while at the same time being committed to tearing down this racist system altogether. Of course, Working Families Party, it's a long list, brother. Working Families Party, they came out and support us as well. Who else? DC Missing Voices, they were the group that were behind the search of Relisha Rudd, and we're still searching for Relisha Rudd. Just want to make that clear. And of course, today we earned a 10-act endorsement for our stance and fighting for renters across the city. I'm in full support of the Reclaim Rent Control platform, to make sure that we're creating more protections for all of our renters, not just because you hear that a lot in a lot of meetings. They're like, oh, well, I'm a homeowner, I'm a taxpayer. Well, renters pay taxes too. We need to make sure that when we talk about
Yeah, your phone was breaking out a little bit. But so but you said something earlier, and you talking about the youth, right? And that's a big concern I know for me. Could you still hear me, Lorenzo? I just want to make sure before I'm talking too much. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's real choppy right now. You in probably a bad area. Oh yeah, I can see you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, so I want to know, so the youth. I'm particularly concerned about the youth right now, and I know you've been very vocal, and you've been one of the few people that I've known to actually speak and say truthfully and be real representative of what some of these folks have been saying, right? From the and you've been, people have been critical about you in some stances with the police, but some of these things you kind of, what's going on right now, that tension that's going on right now, some of these things you have kind of been hitting out there, right? So
Right.
I want to know what are we doing for our youth, especially when we think about the context of Washington D.C. being the #1 incarcerated per capita and the #1 gentrified per capita, and the youth who's graduating, they didn't have a graduation this year, but how many of these youth think that they're going to stay in this city that's graduating and coming out of high school? How are we addressing this?
Well, I have to say that I believe that a lot of the youth see what's going on. You know, a lot of them are paying attention, and they do not see a city that's affordable for them. Sunlight. Don't see a city that caters to what their needs are. We couldn't even do the basics of raising the age for, lowering the age for our students, our youth to vote, to participate. Education budget affects them. They're in our schools. Why can't they have a voice on how that budget is, distributed in the city? So I feel that a lot of our youth, and you see it on the streets today, they're not with the fake stuff that they've been delivering for so long. It's breaking up.
Now you good. You good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're not with the things that you're saying. And I know it's a difficult conversation for a lot of our seniors, and even when I started this campaign, the whole narrative was, oh, he's a radical. He just want to come and, get rid of the police and all that. I'm like, no, I just want to come and challenge your thinking of how we need to be addressing the needs of our community. Anytime that I can sit in the back room with a commander, and MPD don't really care for me too much, but they'll sit and talk, and the commanders will tell you like, yeah, we're the only agency in the community. I'm like, well, you're not a social service agency. You can't address housing. You can't address homelessness. You can't address mental health services. You cannot address the fact that people can't pay their rent in this city. Because you cannot solve all those issues, you should not be the first ones that's sent into our communities to address it. Because a lot of these incidents are a response to that. So when you see the babies of our city rise up and say, we demand, fair access to food, we demand equal access to employment opportunities and to grants so we can start our own businesses, make sure that we be able to start building wealth for our families the way that you did not allow my grandparents to do for themselves.
Yeah, your phone breaking up again.
I think we're about to stop.
There we go.
Hold on,
Coming back.
yeah, we about to stop. My bad. But yeah, I have to give credit to a lot of the youth in the city because they're not gone with the okie doke. They challenge the powers that be, and it inspires me to know that there's a whole generation coming behind me that I have to look out for, that I have to, speak up for and make sure that I'm elevating their voices. Not just me speaking as a mouthpiece for them, but making sure that our children know that they have power in their own voices, and they can rise up and use that voice, and I got your back, and that's how we handle it.
You still kind of choppy, people getting some of it.
Sorry, Rob.
No, yeah, it's you working. Look, you working. It's June 2nd, right?
Yeah, election day is Tuesday. So yeah,
2nd.
Like every minute of my time is it's out here to make sure that we get out to vote. Make sure people participate. And not forget that even though we're in the middle of this pandemic, we still need your voices to make some big changes in the city. We have too many challenges and and I'll say it again, too many puppets coming around claiming, what we need for ourselves when we already know we've been speaking about these things for years. So I'm committed.
So a lot of people don't a lot of youth, because I'm you know, and I want to talk about the police one, coming back to that a little bit, because you were one of the first candidates that I seen when we talked about police, and you said we need to look at this from a public health lens, right?
That's
And I
correct.
and when I seen that, it was a time when I heard one of these. It was one of these police commanders almost echo your words, and I was like, oh, he said we can't over police this. Now these people that was
We
very
can't we
critical
can't
of me,
arrest our way out of this.
and I
Like for
recall him.
every Yeah, after the incidents on Sheriff Road
Hmm.
in summer 2018, the
Hmm.
uprising in Deanwood, I like to call it,
Yeah.
where people had enough. They weren't going to tolerate the stop and frisk and the harassment and the abusing and even the putting people's lives in jeopardy
Yeah.
by saying their names to the community, trying to imply that they're cooperating with them in some way, saying it publicly,
Hmm.
you know, so which put lives in jeopardy. But we, ever since that night,
Hmm.
where it was like 60 or 70 cops on Chef Road
Hmm.
going, not the videos y'all saw recently, that happened on Sheriff Road 2 years ago. People
Yeah.
telling cops, take your badge off. Take your
Hmm.
badge off and let's do this. People were going blow for blow with the cops. And it wasn't just men in our community, it was women and children outside. There was a 6-year-old that was pepper sprayed that night. And Chief Newsom and Mayor Bowser, all of a sudden their whole language changed ever since
Hmm.
that night. First they stopped saying community policing, then it was constitutional policing, trying to say that they were within the U.S. the rights of the Constitution to do the things that they were doing, without implying that they were actually harassing and abusing people by using that same
Hmm.
Constitution. It was just that whole language changed, and then you saw the commanders and the beat officers come to our community meetings and our meetings saying, "Oh, we can't arrest our way out of this." I was like, "Oh."
Hmm.
The whole language changed because they realized that,
Hmm.
oh, these people are really the fight,
Hmm.
and to the point
Yeah.
where people were ready to go down to the precinct and set it on fire. That's how far it was going to go.
Hmm.
But once they saw that people pushed back, people made it clear that they knew their rights
Hmm.
and made it clear that they had a lot of legal resources, which was important during that time. A lot of legal
Hmm.
resources that people can tap into to threaten lawsuits. Bring the ACLU, thank you, to take on the cases about violating the Fourth Amendment. That was the key. Try to get some lawsuits stirring about that, making sure there was attention and energy behind the Jeffrey Price case, who was killed by MPD while he was riding his ATV on Division Ave. They intentionally killed this brother, in front of an
Hmm.
entire community. And they did not understand why people were still mad, still angry, about that. No answers. Body cam footage still to this day. The family still have to see that happened in this city. So, Daquan Young, Marquise Allison,
You're breaking
two
up
other
again.
names, brothers who,
You're going in and out again. We can't hear you right now.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, but you back. You choppy, but I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. You good. You sound
Yeah,
good.
I see it. Okay. Now, I do see a question that was there ever a resolution to the BB gun case? No. Okay. I did not get access to any of the body cam footage from that night of the brawl. Um, Police, when I asked Newsom directly, in writing about that young man, he tried to say that, oh, the police know who he is and they can go back and arrest him if they so choose. That's how he left it. So I was like, oh, then he must work for you. He must work for y'all. Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of because he surely wasn't from our neighborhood. In the wings. But it was something that, it was a tactic that was used constantly,
Hmm.
plant somebody, to plant a gun, in this case, a BB gun, as justification to stop and frisk everyone on that corner. Only problem
Hmm.
is it was a tactic that was repeated too many times in my community, over and over and over. People were hip, as soon as they pulled up, the camera started recording, so, and they knew their rights. So, that was the resolution of it, It garnered a lot of attention. We had a big historic hearing down at Deanwood Recreation Center on policing in Ward 7 and 8. It was packed in that room. You know, people came out and we made sure the police weren't there so people could tell their stories without fear and retaliation. You know, that was something that we needed to do so that people can see for the first time how powerful their own voices were. And to see, you know, young men from my community who stepped up to the plate, you know, and say, you know what, I'm not going to be afraid no more. I'm going to just tell you what life is like for me in Washington, D.C. And to see the faces of the council members, to hear that so bluntly, you know, it did shake the earth a little bit. You know, you even had Anita Bonds come out and say, you know, I used to live in Deanwood. You know, I got friends over there. They were calling me asking what's going on. You know, so it did challenge the whole council to at least ask the questions. You know?
And all of this happened. All of this happened right in front of Nooks. Is that correct? Right.
That's correct. And Nooks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Nooks was part of a development deal. You know, Nooks Barbershop, Wilkins Daycare, like a, you know, Sonny's Stereo. And there was a church there as well. You know, there was the owner of the property sold the property without telling the tenants that he was planning to sell. I told the tenants that he was planning to sell, but he went back to them saying that, oh, it was a lie. The commissioner's lying. Until the day the property was sold. Once the property was sold.
It was sold without people's attention and people not knowing about it and police coming around to vacate it and doing And this is the trend that we've noticed all across the city, correct? And absolutely. When we talk about what's displacement in Washington, D.C., we talking about massive concentration. We talking about police come and then development come, right? And we see that at Nooks. We're seeing that at Brooklyn Manor. We see that in certain, we see that in any neighborhood that's slated for development. We see police come, private police, and then we see development happen. And you talking about Nooks, a special case where development is ongoing and police is throwing alley oops for throwing with fake BB guns.
They just picked the wrong block, wrong neighborhood, the wrong commissioner. It's just, you know, and I have to tell folks, like, these are people that I grew up with, that went to school with us, they're from my community, you know. I couldn't allow that, you know, I couldn't allow that. And unfortunately, you know, the downside of that was I saw every person that called themselves a leader in Ward 7, how quiet they were. You know, so silent. You know, all the text messages and calls for me to try to pressure me to go sit on the fence. You know, tone it down and all that. I'm like, what you mean tone it down? We got people out here crying. They're mad. I got mothers grieving. What do you mean tone it down? You should be hyping it up. You know, even people that's running in this race, it's quiet. You know, so I'm very proud of that moment because you know you really see who's willing to be about the people, who's really, you know, just out here talking. But I know that as long as we committed to elevating the lives of so many working class people across Ward 7 and Ward 8, you know, because I do believe that our struggle is a collective one. You know, we can change things if we're truly committed to shaking up the status quo. You know, I've seen it in action. You know, my own community showed me. You know, I've been able to build with people who work on our campaign right now, who I met during that period. You know, there was two young ladies who are white who live in Deanwood, you know, and they came out and volunteered at the barbershop as part of a mutual aid effort.
You're going out again. I can't hear you at all right now. We're going out back. We getting back. We getting back.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. We got sound. Go ahead. We good.
Okay, yeah. I'm around the circle there. We're trying to.
You running. Look, we know you hustling. You out there with the people. We need you out there with the people so we ain't complaining. You hear me?
Right. You know, trying to get these social business conversations, you know, in front of people's houses. You know, I'm like, you can stand on your porch. We can talk. You know. So,
And how is that kind of the social? Because this impacted your campaign a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And how?
And, it adds to the whole talk around social distancing and even, the interactions with police because of it. I tell folks that, we're still human, and human beings like to socialize. It's hard for us. We're not robots, so there's no switch that we can just press to say that, oh, I can't, go see that person or, want to hug that person or, want to reach out and grab that person's hand. That's a hard thing to just shut off overnight. But at the very least in this campaign, it allowed us to, step up our digital organizing. I had to tell folks, like, oh, we ain't getting nothing to do yet. I'm like,
we're breaking up again.
It's been tough.
That's breaking up.
Hear me now?
You coming back? Yeah, okay. You coming back? Yeah.
Yeah, it's been tough, but it's been pushing us to be creative.
But you, I think you in Ward 7, you going against incumbent Vince Gray, and he got a lot of history in Washington D.C. We all know Vince Gray was out mayor at one time. He's had a lot of controversy around his name. He's been one of those candidates that, we as natives, we know a lot of things have circulated and moved around. But what makes you separate from the incumbent? How are you separated most? Can we speak on that a little bit?
Absolutely. And, and I tell folks that this isn't a race to, to completely be all about knocking Gray. I tell you the same thing that my grandmother told me. She feels it's time. She feels it's time for some type of fresh, new leadership that, can push policies that's actually going to benefit so many more families than what's been done under his leadership. We still have so many, people who work retail jobs, who work as first responders, who work, up in our hospitals, and we already know the drama around United Medical Center and building out a new hospital east of the river and trying to make sure that it's a full service one with a level 1 or level 2 trauma care center. But, many people believe that the type of leadership that he's been able to bring to this point over his long career, there needs to be an elevation of that, some type of progression, where we actually are uplifting and focusing on so many other lives that have been ignored for too long. We started out this conversation talking about police brutality because that's a real issue in Ward 7. Unfortunately, he believes that it's not. Even when as far as saying that mothers should not know the name of the cops that killed their sons or daughters. That's not, that's not going to work for me. That's not going to work for me. And that's not no shot at him, as a man. That's a shot at your policies. That's a shot at what you're pushing that's supposed to represent my life. I don't believe that, mothers should not know who killed their sons, no matter if somebody from our community or somebody with a badge. I need to know. Tell me the name. I know where they work at. Clearly, people need to know that information so we can hold people accountable for what they do in this city. We differ on how we should serve our seniors. My experience with his office was, when there were 2 seniors in Deanwood that had a sinkhole that took both their houses. They called his office for help. His office pushed back saying, oh, we're just the legislative arm. Not much we can do. So who else they call, right? The ANC commissioner.
Yeah.
The person who doesn't get paid for any of this. They call me and say, hey.
The ACU.
Yeah, that's me. And I had to sit on the phone and try to understand, like, he got a whole paid staff. You mean to tell me they couldn't tell you that we need to get you in contact with the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking to figure out why your insurance company is not trying to pay this claim? We're also going to, since this is my neighborhood, I know the history records of this property, we're going to also show the city that, this has been a long-standing problem with this property. Insurance companies trying to say this is an act of God, but many of us know that this was the act of a shoddy developer, a white developer that came to Deanwood and sold shoddy properties to black people. That's the history of suburban gardens in Deanwood, where these 2 homes were located. So once we had that understanding with the city and with DISB, we were able to negotiate, have them negotiate on their behalf with the insurance companies to get some type of settlement for them instead of a claim that wasn't getting paid.
Okay.
And that means that we had to pull the city administrator's office into a room over at Capitol View Library. We all sat at a big table, Rashad Young, and, had DHCV in there, so it was a collective of agencies that tried to come together to piece together some type of deal for these two ladies to ensure that, they were made whole. They were already saying that they no longer wanted to live in the city because of that experience, because their council member wouldn't help them, saying they're just a legislative arm. They didn't understand that. And one of these ladies actually stood on the corner and waved signs for grace. So she took it personal. I got you in office, boy. That's what she said. So it's sort of like, how can you treat your own people like this? So once we were able to jump in and try to help and support them, that was really a challenge for me to wake up and say, you know what, this we can't allow this to continue. People need better constituent services. They need better policies that actually uplift our lives. And we need council members who are committed to being advocates for every resident. Not afraid to advocate for your resident and fight for them. People want to see that. They want that. They don't want somebody to just sitting up in the Wilson building collecting a check.
Okay, so we've been on for a while, and before we get off, I want to ask you one question. It just popped up, and folks, I've been pretty, I've been focused a lot of my work on mass incarceration, and it just came up. They say, what about our unjustly sentenced? I particularly, and we on the OurCity platform, so I think it's cool that we highlight some particular
Absolutely.
instances, and we talk about Anton White, and we talk about Eric Hicks, who a lot of this movement has been ignited around guys that we know that's been unjustly sentenced, who's been specifically, it's federal things that's happening that I know that you probably couldn't do in the state. Like, DC, we can't pass because it's federal laws in place right now, but it's things that we are. Mass incarceration is a big thing. What are we going to do for mass incarceration? These unjustly sentenced folks that's been home, these kids that's coming home from prison that don't rent $3,000, and what are we doing for our folks, man?
Right. And I like to remind folks, that in Ward 7 we have a resilient, formerly incarcerated population. And they deserve the same opportunities as everybody else in this city. They're our families, they're our neighbors, our cousins, our friends, you name it. These are people we know, and they can be people that you may not even know their background. You probably assume that, they had a good life, got them a nice job, but you didn't know their struggles, or the path they had to walk to get to that point. So we have to really challenge the people that we know in our communities to think differently of folks who are considered returning citizens or formerly incarcerated, and think of them as human beings, our neighbors who deserve opportunities like everybody else, and opportunities that allow them to create, allow them to create their own, provide seed money, grant money, so that we can get out of this business of trying to ban the box. Let's create a whole new box, where folks can build their own businesses. And we know that, small businesses are the backbone of our economy in this city. Why aren't we investing in our own people who've been, and I like to tell these folks, we don't know if somebody actually did what they're accused of, because there's a history in this city of people being locked away for years for things they did not do at all. So because we know that history, we got to make sure that once that time is served, it's done. And people who are serving time that they should not be serving, we got to make sure we're making direct investments in legal services to ensure that we're doing everything possible to bring them home, to correct the wrongs that were made. That's why I was in full support of the second look at. Went down and testified in support of it, still advocating for it to be passed because it is necessary. We need to make sure that that is one piece of legislation that's on the table so that we can bring our brothers and sisters back home to Washington, D.C. And you already know. Huh?
Yeah, and I'm just and it's clicking to me because I'm sitting right here thinking about what we talked about earlier with Deanwood and how this was caught on case. This was the entrapment, this violation of constitutional right. And we talking about mass incarceration in D.C. And then we now talking about people now. Look, if it was corruption that happened right there, then it's something right there. That right there, and I think that's important because this was a part of you, right? It's
Right,
important for people to kind of be looking at people that second look that you're talking about.
right, right. And it shows a system that, was created to not benefit us at all.
Mm-hmm.
That they were trying to entrap them brothers and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
They chose to push back and say, not today.
Mm-hmm.
But just imagine how many more times that happened. How many more times that people remain silent out of fear of what would happen to them if they spoke out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's why when we organized that hearing, it was important for MPD to not be in the room
Mm-hmm.
because, folks didn't want, that type of aggression in their face. We also wanted to make sure there was an option for people to testify without being on camera,
Mm-hmm.
so people can tell their truth to the people who have the power to make change in this city. So when we see incidents like that play out in our communities, not just in Deanwood, but we see it in Marshall Heights, you see it in Penn Branch, you see it up Benning, it is something that plays out all throughout Ward 7. 6th District does not have a stellar reputation, for people to be clamoring about how good their cops are. They have a history of targeting people. They have a history of beating people up in the police station, which was my elementary school. So, it's like double trauma for people that grew up in Deanwood to see a space where we had a great educational experience be turned into a space of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That's very, challenging for us that live in this community with the headquarters of 6th District. So, we know that that's the issue. We know that the gun recovery unit, has, played this long game of like, we're doing everything possible to find the guns. But when only 1% of all the stops you're making produces a weapon, that tells me that your strategy does not work. It tells me that this $500 million that we're giving to MPD, it's not keeping nobody safe. That's why I organize and work with Charles Allen to make sure we put money in the budget with the Office of Police Complaints so that we can invest in an investigator to actually analyze the gun recovery unit and all the special units within MPD to understand, what are you doing? What's your tactics? Why you keep turning off your body cam footage? Things like that. We need to investigate that to try to understand when the numbers of all the stops are not measuring up to the number of weapons that you're collecting. 1%, that tells me that you're actually just torturing people in our city and not really getting all the weapons that you claim that we should be getting off those streets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. Well, we had you on here for 40. We're approaching the hour, and they're gonna cut us off soon, man. But like,
Okay.
I want to again, before we get off, I want to congratulate you again, our future Ward 7 council member we got right here, man. So y'all heard him right now on OurCity, man. And one thing about and we talked before you came on earlier, and one thing I know before you even start running, you say, I said, Lorenzo, this is serious. And Lorenzo, we proud of you, DC native, and I tell the people to get out, tell them what to do to support you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Proud DC native, born and raised right here in Ward 7, third generation Washingtonian, just trying to do my part to make this city better. And I'm proud of the fact that I'm not bought and paid for by no entity, no politician. I'm not no Bowser puppet, and I'm certainly not nobody that's going to be a slave to developers in the city. So we need to get out and get our voices heard at the polls. So it's very important that you show up. Early voting is happening right now, 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. at Deanwood Rec, at Hillcrest Rec, and Benning Stoddard Rec. You can pick one of the three. There's only 3 voting centers open in Ward 7. But you can vote at any of the 20 voting centers across the city. So no matter where you at in the city and you see a voting center, you can go in there and vote, no matter where you live at. So we definitely need people to come out and vote. Early voting is happening all the way up until Tuesday. Election Day is June 2nd, this Tuesday, and the polls will be open on Election Day, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Come out to vote. Number 2 on the ballot, Anthony Lorenzo Green for Ward 7. Be the village. Let's be committed so we can fight for all of our families, who've been, trying to get the opportunities that they've been seeing happening and given to other people who've been moving into this city. But we have so many folks who built this city who's still looking for their come up. We got to make sure that we have an equitable budget, finally, an equitable budget where we're making those investments in Ward 7, in our schools in Ward 7, in our communities in Ward 7, making sure that we're doing our part to expand opportunities, investing in grant programs so we can start our own businesses and get in on these development projects that we keep getting cut out of. So many businesses that use DC or Ward 7 and 8, for example, for the address, but they're not really from here. They weren't established here, homegrown businesses. So we need to make sure that we're doing everything possible to create more opportunities for our families, and at the same time, making sure we're looking out for our workers in the city. We got so many firefighters, healthcare workers, teachers that live in Ward 7 and 8, and they are being left behind. They stood up for us during this pandemic. We need to make sure we're standing up for them as well.
Okay. Well, there you have it, man. We've all heard from Anthony Lorenzo Green, man. I appreciate you for jumping on the platform today. And, folks coming out to vote, people vote Lorenzo Green.
Yes, please, man. Number 2, we need your support. We already know. I have to believe I may be the man to beat because, I'm the only one that's getting the signs ripped down. So, it's a lot of funny stuff going down.
You're the man to beat right now. I think that's
it. it's like everybody like, where are your signs? I'm like, as soon as I put it up, somebody coming down ripping it down. It's like, what in the world? I'm not the council member. Maybe they believe I'm about to be the council member. We only can do that with your help and your support. And we're definitely going to win this race on Tuesday.
Thank God, and man, I know you come from a spiritual family too. You got a grandma that's. Hey, Lorenzo, we glad to have you, man. You hear me?
Absolutely. God, I keep God close. I like cell phones. I grew up in a holiness church, so I do have like a preacher tone to when I talk. But that's only because of grandma. She raised us to be preachers, but I had different plans. So
that's important. That's an important point for some of us voters. We want to know. Yeah. When you like your relationship with God, that's grandma.
And anybody that grew up in the holiness church, you already know they had you in church all week. Intercessory prayer on Tuesday, Bible class Thursday, feed the homeless on Friday. Choir rehearsal on Saturday. You got to wash some cars too. And then I had to, do the music. On Sundays. Record the choir and all that. So. Yeah, it was an all-week thing. So, and I didn't get free until I turned 18. Grandma wasn't playing with that. 18, you can make your own decisions, but up until 18, you in this church every week. That's how she raised
it. So you come from that home where we all come from, the DC natives.
Right.
We appreciate you. I'm gonna let you go, Lorenzo. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, brother, and I appreciate it. And thank everybody for joining. God bless.
All right. I think